Hey, what's going on, guys? Kalamazi here, and today we have a lot, literally a lot to talk about. In this week's Shadowlands beta build, there is a lot of covenant tuning, class tuning, new abilities were added for certain classes, other classes had abilities removed. There was a lot done. And for Warlocks, well, the Necrolord Decimating Bolt nerfs, which we had thought might have been coming for a while, well, they came and they've gone. So, as mentioned, we've got a lot to get into today. We're going to talk Destro, we're going to talk Demo, we're going to talk Affliction, we're going to talk what Covenant's bad now, what Covenant's better now, what we're doing. We're going to look at Covenant abilities, Soulbinds, Conduits, basically everything that has changed, and then get right into the actual gameplay to show you guys why I think this new Covenant is better now than Necrolord was. Quick shameless plug here, any Week Auras, profiles, add-ons you see in this video are available to you guys for free on my Twitch if you want to swing by. Grab them, drop a follow, hang out anytime, ask any questions. I'm happy to help. So, let's get right into this. The first thing that I want to talk about here, these are the nerfs from today. So, basically, this week, Soul Rot has had its health cost removed. You had to previously use 20% of your max health to cast the spell, while retaining a minor mana cost. Additionally, the primary target of your Soul Rot will now take increased damage compared to secondary targets. So, I want to clarify here, first of all, that when this first came out, we weren't sure this affected drain life, meaning the increased damage here. This is an increased damage drain life, or this is more soul rot damage. We weren't really sure, but we'll get to that. Number 2, the Necrolord Covenant, and this is the big one, boys. Decimating Bolt has been tweaked to help balance out some talent choices that could greatly swing the value of this ability. For Afflocks with Drain Soul talented, Decimating Bolt will now only affect your next Drain Soul, was previously 3. It's pretty big. So, essentially playing the same Decimating Bolt build with the Malefic Wrath Legendary, with all the damage amps you had, it's essentially a 66% nerf to that build. The Drain Soul, I guess, effect in that build. Destruction Warlocks with Fire and Brimstone chosen will have their bonus to image value reduced. So this is the Destruction AoE nerf to Fire and Brimstone. It is what it is. It doesn't say how much the actual damage nerf is, and when it came to class changes being data mined, it didn't say either. Well, I can show you. So, when you have Fire and Brimstone selected, your Decimating Bolt actual ability button is modified. This is what it looks like without Fire and Brimstone. You're rocking a normal 200% damage increase for your next 3 incinerates. It goes 200 baseline to 400, depending on how low health-wise the mob is. If you swap to Fire and Brimstone, though, that 200 goes to 80%. So it's a pretty big nerf to Fire and Brimstone if you were a Necrolord. But the thing is, I'm actually not really concerned with this. It doesn't really hurt Destruction and Plus a whole lot, because I do feel that Inferno at this point is the better talent pretty much as a whole when you're playing the Reign of Chaos, Reign of Fire, Wilfred's build. So there's not a whole lot to that. The Fire and Brimstone playstyle is cool. I like it a lot. I wish it had stuck around, but I mean, it was only really a thing for Necrolord in the first place because nobody else played it. It was still an undertuned talent. The final thing here, when it comes to like the Covenant changes, still around Necrolord, for Demonology Warlocks, the buff has been altered to affect your next Shadow Bolt or Demon Bolt. By the way, this is the wrong Demon Bolt tooltip. Your next Shadow Bolt or Demon Bolt, rather than just Shadow Bolt. In an upcoming build, the buff will only interact with Demon Bolt for Demonology Warlocks. So, this is actually a really good change. I'm going to talk about that in a little while here when we dive into each one a bit more, but there's a big difference, in my opinion, between Shadow Bolt and Demon Bolt being affected by Decimating Bolt. Leaving them both affected by it would not have been very good, because you cast a lot more Shadow Bolts than you do Demon Bolts, but in a later build, shifting just to Demon Bolt, well, it's a step in the right direction. Now, as far as the actual nerfs went today, we weren't really sure what the spell power modifier changes were to Soul Rot or to a few other abilities here. So this is what we had. Basically, when it comes to... Where's Soul Rot at here? Let's see. Where are we at here? Soul Rot, there we go. So what it does, they've essentially doubled the damage that Soul Rot deals to your primary target. The target that you actually cast the Soul Rot on will take twice the amount of damage than every other target that gets the dot applied to it as well, and that dot being applied to them enables you to drain life. Now, the thing with this change, it's, in my opinion, it's not the change that we needed for Night Fae. Night Fae is still the worst covenant by far for Warlocks. If they really want to make this competitive, they need to buff the dot damage, probably a bit more anyways. They needed to amplify the damage that Drain Life deals to the targets that have Soul Rot on them. Even when you're playing Affliction with Inevitable Demise to talent at max stacks, you cast this ability, you only AoE Drain Life one time when you have the ID stacks. Otherwise, it's not even worth it. You'd rather just cast other filler spells or refresh dots. It's just not worth it. So a buff to its primary damage is something. I think we might see more buffs to this later on. But at this point, it's still not really very good whatsoever. Something interesting here, though. Some undocumented, or I guess not undocumented, but they didn't mention this in the Covenant tuning post here. They did also nerf Scouring Tithe, as well as Impending Catastrophe. Scouring Tithe being the Kyrian ability. It deals 80% spell power damage on impact, and they nerfed it by about 20% here, I believe, as well, spell power-wise. The same can be said for spell power damage of Impending Catastrophe. They did not hit the impact damage, but it's still there. Now, for the most part, what I've seen, a lot of people got nerfs across the board today, and we thought some larger tuning waves were coming. Well, basically every class got changes. So this might not seem like it's that bad for Kyrian or Venthyr, and realistically, it's not. However, there are some other things that are affected by these changes, not really the tuning here, but more so the Necrolord changes, both the Drain Soul, to Fire and Brimstone, Demon Bolt, everything. And that's the actual conduits. The conduits that Warlocks have access to. Basically, the Covenant-based conduits. The ones that amplify their damaging effects. Like Scouring Tithe. Like Decimating Bolt. All of those. So, let's take a look at those briefly here. Number one, the Soul Tithe thing here basically stays the same. If a target dies, you have increased to Chaos Bolt damage, Rapture, or your pet damage. The thing here, it gets interesting when you get down to Prolonged Decimation. Now, it still says Incinerate, Shadow Bolt, or Drain Soul. It's still the same thing. It gives you a 10% chance to not consume a charge of Decimating Bolt. You still have 3 Incinerate cast with Prolonged Decimation. I want to make that clear. The only thing that's changed with this is you have 1 Drain Soul channel, which it says right here. You have 1 Drain Soul channel instead of 3. You still have 3 Incinerate cast. You still have 3 Shadow Bolt casts that are buffed by Decimating Bolt. When it comes to the Drain Soul change, though, this is a pretty big nerf to this conduit as well, because having 3 Drain Soul charges means you have, 3 chances to proc this conduit and have an extra Drain Soul, or 2 or 3 if it procs in your Drain Soul window. However, with Drain Soul going to 1 charge being buffed by Decimating Bolt, not 3, this is also a very large nerf to this conduit, and I feel like this was probably nerfed in the first place due to Drain Soul being affected by Decimating Bolt. So I wouldn't mind seeing this buffed again, a bit like just percentage-wise, but maybe like a middle ground here. I believe it was 20% initially at rank 10, 15% probably wouldn't be that bad. But I could certainly see some changes coming to this after the larger Drain Soul tuning goes into play. The second change here is to the Soul Eater Night Fae Potency Conduit. Soul Rot damage and radius is increased by 30%. So this is an additional 30% on top of the 100% damage buff that it got to its single target damage today. Now, we're going to get into Covenants in a second here. Necrolord is not the best for Affliction, I feel, anymore, playing the Drain Soul build. It's not where you want to be. I'm curious to test out how Soul Eater is. The 30% damage amp on top of the doubling of the single target damage that Night Fae brings. The main issue that I see here, though, when it comes to playing as Affliction, the dot only lasts 8 seconds, which means you're probably not going to be able to squeeze in all 5 Raptures, or be really close to not doing so if you have to refresh a dot in the middle of your Rapture window. That's a bit of an issue, but the damage can be pretty impactful. So let's talk a little bit about, I guess, our new Covenant as Warlocks. So when it comes to Affliction Warlocks, shifting away from the Necrolord Decimating Bolt Drain Soul playstyle, I do truly feel that Kyrian is your best bet at this point. Now, Kyrian, Venthyr, and Night Fae all have a dot aspect to them. They are all 3 extended by your Dark Lair, and they all 3 do count towards Malefic Rapture's damage count. The difference being between the difference between like Venthyr and Night Fae compared to Kyrian is that Venthyr and Night Fae, their dots, Venthyr is, I believe, 12 seconds long, impending catastrophe, and Night Fae, the Soul Rot ability, is 8 seconds long. Scouring Tithe is a dot that you put up and you refresh over and over and over on a single target boss. If a target dies, okay, well, you can't refresh it, but you get 5 shards back, and that's pretty big as well. More raptures, more damage. Whenever this dot falls, you literally just refresh it. It's very similar to Unstable Affliction as Affliction. You put up UA, you put up your Scouring Tithe. They're similar in duration. When UA falls, you refresh it. When your Scouring Tithe falls, you'll see in about 10 seconds here, it's going to light up again. You just refresh it. The big thing here is that you're casting Raptures every so often, right? For the most part, like, depending on what legendary you're playing and things, refresh UA here, and look, there's Scouring Tithe again. You refresh it. Life goes on. For the most part, you're casting Raptures every 45 or so seconds to line up with your Phantom Singularity, giving you an extra dot, more Rapture damage. Now, if you're going to Shard cap outside of that, obviously you'll Rapture once, twice, a few times. But having this extra dot active basically all the time as Affliction brings a lot to your Rapture damage, while also dealing, like, I believe around 6-7% of your damage on a single target encounter. Keep in mind, there are 4 fights in Castle Nathria that are a single target. It might not deal as much damage as Drain Soul does in Execute, but its damage comparatively to Drain Soul outside of that is pretty impressive, and I think a bit closer than people thought it was before. Now, the other question here is that, well, if we're not playing Necrolord for Drain Soul, what legendary are you probably looking at playing as Affliction? Right here. This is actually not the right one, but it's okay. This one here. There you go. The Agony Shard Generation Legendary. The one where Agony gives you a 20% increase to generate a Soul Shard. Shelley put this very well in the Sloot Warlock deep dive we did yesterday. It's essentially 20% more Malefic Rapture cast. This is the only real legendary that we have outside of, like, I mean, this is really the only generic one we have that works in every setting. We have this one. We have the Corruption Slow. We have Wrath of Consumption, and we have the Drain Soul one, which, once again, if you're not playing Decimating Bolts, you're not getting those crazy empowered Drain Souls, and this is just your best bet. You get the extra shard generation in Nathria, in PvP, in PvE. Anywhere you go, Agony is a mainstay of your toolkit, so this effect is exceptionally powerful. Now, we don't know where this effect drops from. I will tell you that much. It has not been data mined. It has not been found. It's not even listed in-game at this point. It is right here. We don't know where this or Corruption come from. The Drain Soul legendary is from Sire to Nathrius, and Wrath of Consumption, I believe, is from Spires of Ascension. So we don't really know at this point what we need to do to acquire this, but it's still very, very strong. Now, getting back to Scouring Tithe once again, outside of this being a permanent dot, the other issue that I had looking at Soul Rot for Night Fae and Impending Catastrophe for Venthyr was that they're both on a 1-minute cooldown, and they both count towards Rapture, like Rapture damage or an extra dot. But your Singularity is a 45-second cooldown. So what we were doing is actually holding Singularity for 15 seconds for that ability to come off CD, being the Venthyr or Night Fae one, which might not seem like a big deal, but with Phantom Singularity only having a 45-second cooldown, that means every 3 Singularities you're essentially losing a 4th Singularity cast, which is actually pretty big. Now, the alternative is, I guess, maybe look at taking, like, Vile Taint, but the thing is, Vile Taint costs a Soul Shard. Its cooldown is 20 seconds, so you'll be casting, 3 a minute, but it's costing you a shard, which hurts you more in your Rapture window, and it's almost counterintuitive in a sense, because you're waiting for your Catastrophe or your Soul Rot to line up with your Vile Taint or Singularity, but you're then spending a shard to cast it in the first place. It just doesn't work very well. So I think that I know and feel that Kyrian, rotationally, mechanically, damage-wise, works really well. Even excluding the legendary effect and everything here, I think this is just a better version of Affliction. I'll show you in a second here in combat. It just feels a lot better. The thing is, playing the Malefic Wrath, Decimating Bolt, Drain Soul cycle of Affliction, your opener was like 16 or 17 spells long, which you had to do in order for the most part. And if you were targeted with a boss mechanic or had to move or messed up your rotation for whatever reason, it was relatively hard to recover. It probably had the highest skill cap of almost any spec in Shadowlands right now. You had these these 45-second like Rapture Drain Soul windows basically revolving around your Singularity. And if you weren't able to squeeze in your Rapture cast, your 3 Drain Souls, your Decimating Bolts, maintain your Malefic Wrath stacks during that time, your damage dropped off significantly. So in a sense, I'm happy that build is gone. The Agony Shard Generation Legendary, I certainly did downplay a bit when it first came out. You can feel the Shard Generation, and maintaining Scouring Tithe and Unstable Affliction is not as hard as it seems. While Kyrian might not be my #1 choice aesthetically, transmog-wise, everything else, the damage is still there. The sky is not falling, and Affliction Warlock is still good. Let's take a look at a little bit of combat here as Aff playing Scouring Tithe. When you're looking at single target Affliction here, shifting away from Necrolord Decimating Bolt stuff means that for the most part, you're probably not super interested in the Malefic Wrath Legendary anymore. So we're wearing the Agony Shard Generation 1. Now, I want you guys to try and notice if you see any Shard Generation difference here. You can certainly feel it when you're playing it in-game. As far as the openers and things go, I've been following the same thing. Haunt, Agony, Corruption, Siphon Life. I'll get my Haste, Dark Soul going here. Singularity, UA, Scouring Tithe. You Dark Lair, you drain the 3 stacks of Embrace, and you just Rapture. You're maintaining 6-7 dots here. You Rapture it all down. Your Haunt, refresh that. Rapture again, and you just go from there. You just drain. You pretty much just fill. People want like a dot spec. I mean, while our dots still might not be dealing a whole lot of damage, that we're maintaining 6-7 dots, depending, well, if you count Haunt as a dot, which is sort of is in a sense here. UA is falling about now. Guess what? So is Scouring Tithe. Refresh it. Bam. Corruption. Siphon Life. Hit that Agony. And just keep going again. Now we're sitting at 2 shards here. It's a bit lower, I feel, generation-wise than normal, but, well, you know, not the end of the world. I'll refresh a little early here. Haunt. Most of my dots. Bang, bang, bang. I'll even refresh Agony outside of this because we're going to go Singularity. Tide's falling. And once again, we're basically at 4 or 5 shards. Just start Rapturing. I'm going to catch this Shadow's Embrace buff here. Rapture once again. Hit Corruption. We'll hit a Rapture and then hit this because we're just getting a little short on time here. And then Rapture the rest down. That's pretty much the rotation of Aff. At higher haste levels, it gets much easier to manage, but Scouring Tithe, just to set it and forget it kind of refresh here. And it feels good. It feels like you're juggling a lot of dots. It feels like you're a dot class again. Now, I mean, looking at your damage breakdown, Tide's like 7.2%. But look at your Rapture damage here. Rapture, 31.5% is pretty high. We are playing the conduit here that increases Rapture damage a bit, Focus Malignancy, but this is high even for Focus Malignancy. And that's because you're maintaining Agony, Corruption, Siphon Life, Singularity, Scouring Tithe, and Unstable Affliction. That's 6 dots. Scouring Tithe counts as a dot and also works with your Dark Lair and gives you more focus priority Rapture damage. And like I said, it's 7.5% of my damage. Probably was even higher than that, but been out of combat for a little while. It's still good. And if you're able to get the shards off it, that's 5, well, I mean, 5 free Rapture cast. It's good in single target. It's good in AoE. It's just good. It's just straight up good. And it makes this version of Aff feel much different, in my opinion, a lot better than the Drain Soul version. You are punished so hard for having to move in the middle of a Drain cast, or just in the middle of setting up for a Drain cast. Here, you've got plenty of time. Shift around, move, do what you got to do. I do wish our Agony and Corruption, our dots were hitting harder in the first place, but, well, that's life. What can you do? Hopefully tuning addresses this, but this build of Aff playing Scouring Tithe, I like it a lot more. When you're looking at destruction, not a whole lot changes, being real with you guys. Over the past couple of weeks, there have been a decent bit of talk of Scouring Tithe destruction being pretty good also. The thing is, when it came to Castle Nathria, you're going to be playing a lot of Affliction. You're probably going to be playing a little bit of Destro, depending on what's going on. Obviously, Soulbinds and Conduits, that's a nightmare in itself, in a sense. But Scouring Tithe, Destro was gaining a lot of ground, because one of the cool things with Scouring Tithe is that, oh, you can put a Havoc on one target and cast your Scouring Tithe over here, and you replicate the effect, Scouring Tithe, Scouring Tithe. It's really strong. Even outside of that, the damage is there. When it came to playing Necrolord Destro, whether you were cleaving things on 2 targets or single target, when you were not playing Fire and Brimstone, all it was really doing is buffing your Incinerate damage by a decent bit. And you did have Roaring Blaze on top of that to further increase the damage of that. So that was a bit of the Fire Destro build. But the thing is, that build's still going to be around. You're still probably playing Roaring Blaze, Channel Demon Fire, Kata, and these two talents when you're looking at single target bosses, if you decide to play Destro there. But I mean, Aff is probably still a bit better on single target. It's really cool, even though like we're not playing Necrolord now, that the shift has been to Kyrian, and you're getting a lot of value out of Kyrian Destro, out of Kyrian Affliction. And comparing Destro and Aff in the Necrolord Covenant to Kyrian, I think they're both equal. Like, Destro's a bit more powerful. Destro feels almost equal to Affliction power level wise. Now, once again, we know that Drain Soul was incredibly strong. It was like Drain Soul Aff was up here in Necrolord and Destro's down here. They feel a bit more even in the Kyrian Covenant. Obviously, the Drain Soul build, yeah, okay, it took a few hits, meaning it's probably not going to be playable at this point in time, but we knew it was probably going to happen, and that's really just the way that it goes. I think the big question here is if Scouring Tide is going to remain, I guess, Havocable. It seems at this point in time it's made it through multiple builds, and it probably will still be something that you can just do over and over. I mean, Destro is the king of 2-target cleave, and having this effect active on both targets is really, really, really strong. Let's look at a little bit of combat here and some tricks that you can also do with Scouring Tide as a Kyrian Destro Warlock. So, the first thing you guys are probably asking, I got this question on stream, I didn't really know, but I know now, is, hey, if you can Havoc a Scouring Tide, and let's say you kill one mob, but the other stays alive through its remaining duration, what happens? Well, let me show you. Havoc is on both here. We're going to swap to our Havoc target and ignore this one. Kill the Havoc target. Watch this. Bam, 5 shards. So that's the 5 shard portion of Scouring Tide right there. But look at the duration. It's still on CD here. It's about to expire. Look at the duration. Best of both worlds. If that actually happens, you get the 5 shards back, and you get the cooldown refresh. And the even cooler thing is that you're, what, 18 seconds here versus, like, you're waiting, like, 10-ish seconds on your Havoc to come back around. But it's certainly worth waiting on your Havoc to circulate back around, if it's whether that's going to happen or not. Spreading the Scouring Tide debuff, it's big. The damage it deals is relevant, and with Havoc having a 2-second duration extension in Shadowlands, it still makes squeezing in multiple spells really, really, really easy, and just further increases the value of Kyrian Destro, whether it's on a 2-target fight or 3 targets. It's when you can get Havoc usage out of it, it's pretty good. Now, if you're looking at single target Destro, which has not been as strong as Affliction, and I mean, who knows with this Demonology build, which we're going to talk about in a little bit here, it might not be extremely strong, but still, for the most part, it's once again just sort of one of those set it and forget it kind of traits. You'll put up your Scouring Tide, whether you precast it or not, go into your Kata and just go. We're actually playing a Channel Demon Fire build here. It would help to have it on my bars with Roaring Blaze. So we conflagged. I'll wait to conflag again because we're already shard capping. Launch another bolt here. We'll conflag for Roaring Blaze, and then just go into a normal opener here. But the cool thing is, it's expiring. Oh, just put it back up. It's back up again. It's just free damage for the most part. Like, there's really not a whole lot else to it. The damage is just more or less free, and if you're able to Havoc the ability, if a target dies with the effect on it, if you're able to get the 5 shards from the ability, it's okay if it's on CD, because it also brings with it a 10% damage increase to your Chaos Bolt for 10 seconds. Now, that might not seem like a whole lot, and with how Chaos Bolt's not hitting very hard on beta right now. It's not anywhere like it was with Supremacy, but still, a 10% damage increase to your main Soul Shard spender, it's pretty good. And the fact that it's just free damage, you can look at our damage breakdown, it's what, 7.98%, it's still climbing here, and it's off CD. It's pretty decent. If we end up havocing this here on like 2 targets, let's put Immo on 3, you're going to see an even bigger increase in its damage. Like, it's just strong. You can see it climbing. 9, 9.2, 9.6. It's just good. And the fact that this is havocable, if that's even a word, is impressive. If it stays in this current state, there's going to be a lot of min-maxing for Destro on these Havoc cleave-based fights, whether it's in Castle Nathria or even in Mythic Plus. So obviously, I saved the best for last. Let's talk a little bit about these Demonology decimating bolt changes. Now, I'm going to be real with you. We had the Salute Warlock podcast deep dive yesterday with myself, Shelley, and THD. there is mention from all three of us of shifting Necrolord's Decimating Bolt buff from Shadow Bolt to Demon Bolt, and all the interactions that it has with legendaries, with conduits, with other effects. If any changes even came out of that interview, I would not have expected them to happen until next week. And I don't think any of these are. The Drain Soul one, well, for the most part, the Drain Soul one has been on the radar for a while. It's guaranteed. Soul Rot hasn't been good for a long time. That's been guaranteed. I do, however, feel that there's a decent chance the Decimating Bolt change actually might have maybe come out of that. It's so like last second. Oh, by the way, it affects Demon Bolt. It'll work in a later build. Yeah, just have it. Just go. I sort of feel like if somebody heard that it could very well possibly be the case. Regardless of that, though, the unfortunate part here is that I can show you in combat in a minute here what this build will probably look like, but it's not actually working. When you cast Demon Bolt with the Decimating Bolt damage amp, which is supposed to apply to Demon Bolt, it does not. It doesn't consume any charges. There's no damage amp to your bolts, which is unfortunate, but still, it's cool to look at some builds here. There's some pretty spicy builds. So starting off, once again, it sort of feels like Drain Soul and Demon Bolt almost changed places here. Demonology has sort of been like, what covenant do I want? You know, because previously I had mentioned that it's probably just Kyrian for Scouring Tithe for the permanent dot, the shards if you get them, and the damage that brings. And if you're in plus, it's probably Venthyr because, well, it's AoE, and why not? It's Venthyr. Night Fade didn't fit, and Necrolord previously, which is to buff the Shadow Bolt. However, things are changing. So with this build, there's a good bit that I want to test out whenever this is working. The shift to Demon Bolt is big here. Number one, we have a legendary, if I can find it here, that actually, here we go. Shadow Bolt increases the damage of your next Demon Bolt by 25%, stacking up to 4 times. Now, previously in beta, I guess in alpha, you could stack this effect to 4, and casting a bolt would not consume the stack. It would just, you have to maintain it with more Shadow Bolts. It is consuming the stack now. However, you know, it's still a huge damage increase to your first Demon Bolt, and you have 2 more Demon Bolt buffs still. So, this is number one. This is sort of like the Malefic Wrath legendary-esque effect for this build, I suppose. Looking at Demonology talents here. Number 2, Saxhold hasn't been played in a long time, but Shadow Bolt and Demon Bolt deal 4% additional damage per demon you have summoned. Yeah, it might not be performing very well now, but when you have all these stacking damage amps over and over and over, things get out of hand pretty quickly. Oh, by the way, remember this talent that got buffed in early alpha? Power Siphon. Instantly sack 2 imps, generating 2 charges of demonic core that causes Demon Bolt to deal 30% additional damage. So you have a 100% damage amp here, a 30% damage amp here. Probably what? Let's say, I don't know, 2 dogs, 5 imps, I guess 6, 24, you're looking at 32, a pet, 32. You're looking at like a 40-ish% damage amp here. It's like 40, 30, 100, plus Decimating Bolt being anywhere from 200 to 400. That's pretty cool and a pretty big increase to Demon Bolt's damage. The cool thing with Power Siphon as well is that unlike Shadow Bolt with Affliction playing Nightfallers, when you have those Nightfall procs and you're playing Decimating Bolt, you can't really control when you get those procs. If you get it and it lines up with your bolt, awesome. That's cool. But you're not going to hold your Decimating Bolt for it because you're losing too much value. If it doesn't proc for 10 seconds or 20 seconds, it's just, okay, well, I wasted time. With Power Siphon, you can control when you get these procs. When you cast Power Siphon, it gives you 2 stacks of core. Those next 2 bolts you cast will have that damage amp. It corresponds to those 2 core procs specifically, so you can choose to like just amp up 2 massive Demon Bolts and just blast. So like I said, while this build is not working right now with Decimating Bolt, let's take a little look at it briefly, how it probably potentially is going to look in combat. Now, even though Decimating Bolt is not affecting Demon Bolt at this point in time, I still sort of want to see how the rotation would look opener-wise. One thing that I do want to point out is that Power Siphon and Decimating Bolt have 2 odd CDs, being 45 and, well, 30. We'll see how it goes, though. Let's do a normal opener here. We'll precast Demon Bolts into Vile Fiend, Dogs, everything, and go into a Tyrant. We'll go Vile Fiend, Dogs. We'll actually build some shards here, I guess. And then go into a Tyrant. We'll stack our Burning Core stacks a little bit here. Double hand into a Tyrant. There we go. We'll do that. We'll Demonic Strength, we'll even Zerking. And we'll use these actual hand charges here, these shards, to get some new imps rolling out. Alright, so we'll do that. Cast Decimating Bolt. Power Siphon. Bam. Bam. And like, you might see, the Demon Bolt damage is sort of up there. We Fellstormed, obviously, but over a long period of time, having all these pets out, it's going to make a big difference in our Demon Bolt damage. It's sort of hard to track Bale Spider's Burning Core stacks, legendary. I'll be real with you, it's sort of tough, but it's certainly important to line it up, I feel, with your first Power Siphoned, I guess, Power Siphoned Demon Bolt once you get everything rolling. It's really weird here timing-wise, though. As you can see, Power Siphon's back up, and Decimating Bolt's up in 10 seconds. So I suppose we'll just try and dump shards here and set up Bale Spider's Burning Core to 4 stacks. We're at 2 now, 3. This will pretty much be 4. Get some imps out. We'll do another hand here. More imps. There we go. Of course, we get 3 refunds. We'll cast the hand just to sort of get out of, like, excessive range. Pop that. We already consumed our stack. It's actually pretty crazy. Like, it will be much easier if I had a weak war to track this. You definitely want the Bale Spider's Burning Core buff with this build. And it's just sort of, it's sort of convoluted because, like, I'm just used to dumping these Demon Bolt procs. But look at our overall damage here. Look at Demon Bolt, man. It's quite literally up there with Fell Firebolt, Fellstorm. It's up there. And this is without, this is like a half-scuffed opener rotation. This is without Decimating Bolt even affecting Demon Bolt. We're not getting any 200 to 400% damage amp here. There's nothing. Like, this build, I think, is really real. Sack Souls could be back in a good way for Demonology. It really, really could be. We're basically not playing with any kind of Covenant ability. Demon Bolt damage looks real. This build's going to be spicy. If this was working, we're ahead of Fellstorm and Firebolt by a substantial margin. Also, if we hadn't botched our legendary play, it'd be even higher. This build could be really, really legit, and this is just like my first iteration running it. I can't wait for this build to be fixed and give it a shot. Now, one thing that I did want to mention a bit here after summarizing all 3 specs and where I think they feel, where they stand Covenant-wise, is potency conduits are still technically a thing that people are taking into account. I've gotten a lot of questions on stream, a lot of questions on YouTube asking about, hey, Necrolord doesn't get a potency conduit until week 7. Nightbait doesn't get it until week 8. What are we going to do? Well, these are your renown levels here. And basically you get 3 renown levels per week, which means Mythic Raid opens on week 4, you have 13. The cool thing is, as far as being a Kyrian goes, Bastion, your second Soulbind, you get 3 the second Mythic week opens. If you're a Venthyr, well, you have 3 as well. Necrolord's pushed back to week 7, and Night Phase week 8. Now, there's been a lot of hype around Pelagos, looking at the Soulbind calculator here, and his actual mastery ability at the end here. Combat Meditation. Activating your Kyrian class ability increases your mastery by 5% for 20 seconds, and occasionally expels sorrowful memories. Walking through them extends the effect by 3 seconds. The cool thing is, if you're on a boss fight and Scouring Tide's cooldown keeps resetting, you have a permanent mastery buff whenever for the whole fight. Because guess what? Scouring Tide, you just cast it over and over and over. So as Affliction, and even as Destro too. There's a lot of synergy there, which is really cool. And if for some reason the target dies or something weird happens, you can just walk through them and extend it. The thing here, though, there's a lot of hype about this right now. This is a level 39 renown trait. Look at our renown boys. At week 10, we're at 31, 1134, 1237. Week 13, you're at 40. That's quite literally like the PTR stages of 9.1's raid. Like, people are super hyped about its abilities, and they're cool. They're awesome to look at, but it's not going to happen for a long time. You're looking at 3 months after release. So when it comes to the potency conduits, our best bet here is either pretty much Kyrian or Venthyr, if it's all you care about. And Clea, who is the second Soulbind here, gets you access to your potency conduits much faster. You start up, I would imagine, in Mentorship, Potency 1, right into Potency 2. And then you go down here into Resonant Accolades, Potency 3. There you go. And this requires Renown level 13. There's a pretty substantial jump here, though, from 13 to 28, spacing-wise. You can look at Pelagos here. You go... The only ability you get, pretty much, is this. Using a speller ability increases your verse by 1% for 10 seconds. Using another speller ability increases it again. It's sort of like the overclocking Bitband Mechagon Ring combo on live now. you go right into a potency conduit. Sounds good. Then you go here for a random Philo Serenity cooldown reduction. And then you go here at renown level 7, and then you jump to 16. And 16 puts you at, and this is a big jump. This is a huge jump, pretty much, from renown 7 to renown 16. Renown 7 is week 2. Renown 16 is week 3, and that still only gets you 1 potency conduit. You don't unlock your second potency conduit with Pelagos until 25 renown, which is what, week I don't know, 8 or so? Like, you're jumping from 7 to 16 to 24, and there's your potency, which you go right into another potency, and then you can go combat meditation at 39. So there's a lot of hype around this ability here. At the same time, even looking at the Venthyr one, everyone's hyped about Thrillseeker. It's level 39 renown. We're going to be looking at the next raid, or give or take a little bit, PTR, probably when this comes out. So there's been a lot of questions about potency conduits. For the most part, like, you're not really gaining much by sticking with Pelagos in your 1 potency early on if you're Kyrian. And even the same goes for Venthyr too. So this change, the shift to, in my opinion, and most everybody else, the shift to Affliction and Destro playing Bastion, Kyrian, honestly helps, I guess, clear up a decent bit of this stuff here too. And at the same time, if you do end up going Venthyr for Revendreth or Mythic Plus or whatever, like I mentioned, I do think that Venthyr has gained some ground when it comes to Mythic Plus for Destro. Certainly for Affliction, around like Dark Lair extensions and things, you got 3 potency conduits there as well. So, thanks for watching, dudes. I hope this video gave you guys a better look at how each Covenant is stacking up for Affliction, Destro, and Demo Warlocks heading into the later stages of Shadowlands Beta, and hopefully pre-patch in this coming week or the week after. Now, I'm going to say that I still think Necrolord, Drain Soul, Affliction is strong. It was nerfed by essentially 66% because you have 1 drain instead of 3 now. But that 1 drain is still powerful, and when we were messing around earlier on single target dummy, I guess, sims, whatever you want to call it, Drain Soul was still dealing a lot of our damage, like 15, 16, 18%. It's just that even the build is very immobile, and it's hard when things get pushed back to catch up. However, losing those 2 drain amplifications changes that a little bit. It does suffer still a bit from those situations where you have overlapping mechanics or just mess up your rotation, but the actual Kyrian build playing the Agony Shard Generation Legendary, I think personally feels better. It sort of feels like you're almost playing a different spec. Your damage is shifted more towards maintaining 5-6 dots and casting Rapture, versus it being Rapture and Drain Soul damage, while mainly just maintaining dots to buff your, well, Rapture and just Drain Soul windows. So both versions of Affliction are good. I wouldn't be surprised if you do end up seeing some Necrolord play for Drain Soul AF. I want to play with it more over the coming weeks on stream, because I've still been a bit impressed with it even after the nerf, so we gotta see where that goes. I'm extremely excited to play with the Demonology Demon Bolt build, and well, I mean, you know, there are 4 single target bosses in this raid, and well, Demonology does excel at single target damage when it's tuned properly, so we'll see where that goes. I will say the Kyrian Havoc ability for Destro is insane if you can get value out of it. Even if you can't, just having the dot active on 2 targets is really big. So my overall winner from these buffs and nerfs is Kyrian, but Necrolord is still something to keep your eye on. I do want to mention as well that just because I didn't say Venthyr was like where I want to be for Destro, Demo, or AF, I mean, it was more or less from like a rating perspective. Venthyr is good when it comes to Mythic Plus for Demonology, for Affliction for sure, and even for Destro if you're making these larger pulls. With Fire and Brimstone being nerfed, it doesn't really mean a whole lot because you were still playing Inferno as your best talent in that row. So I don't want it to seem like I'm hating on Venthyr. It's just that when you're comparing it to, you know, Scouring Tithe and rating in 2 target settings, whether you can Havoc your Scouring Tithe or put it up on the boss or whatever, it just doesn't shine as much as Kyrian, in my opinion. Let me know what you guys think of all these changes in the comments below. What you think about these new builds. I'm curious. I will say Necrolord Warlock sounds better to me than Kyrian Warlock thematically, flavor-wise, but, well, you know, we can't all be winners. But yeah, thanks for watching, dudes. Once again, any Weak Warriors profiles, add-ons available to you guys for free on my Twitch if you want to swing by and grab them. If you like the video, feel free to hit the subscribe button below, that like button right down there as well, to know when I post more content. Thanks again, dudes, and I'll see y'all again soon on stream. Peace.